Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Mental Health Month webinar, mini webinar that we are doing as a few extras this month. My name is Carli Saw, and we'll be talking about EAPs, what they actually are and why they matter. And today I'm going to be joined by Vincent, who is the founder at Talked, and who's just popped back on. I thought it surprised me because I wasn't expecting him to be there. And who actually is the provider for Strawberry Seed in terms of EAP programs. So what I'm going to do first is actually just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and that we're all meeting from today, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that will be joining us today. So very briefly, I'll let Vincent talk about his organisation, but Strawberry Seed provide HR and recruitment services to small businesses right across the country. And we have employees in different states. And so we've actually had an EAP program at Strawberry Seed. I'd had a bit of a look before because I couldn't remember when we first got it, but it was about 2001 we started. So I think I had like sort of three, four maybe employees at that point. We did start with a small local one, but we have people in different states and different locations. And this year we've moved across to Talked, which is why I've asked Vincent to come along because, we think it's been a great experience and has a lot of value. But here's my lovely team. And, this month in particular, we're working very hard to try and raise awareness for mental health. But at the same time, it's also something that we do quite often and talk to employers about quite often, is the mental health and the concerns that they have and the ways to help manage that with their team. So today I'm going to provide you a bit of a HR perspective on EAP and sort of what it is and why I think it's important. And then, Vincent will be able to go through and talk a little bit about their product Talked, which sounds weird to say when you say talk about Talked, but so for me, an EAP or an employee assistance program is very much about having a tool in your toolkit as a leader, because it's not just a nice to have, in my opinion. I was looking at some statistics earlier just to sort of get a bit of a feel, and in the 4 years leading up to 2023, in New South Wales alone, physical injuries in the workplace went up 11%, but psychological injuries went up 30%. And I did a little bit more digging, and that seemed to really be quite consistent. And so an EAP isn't just there to sort of do crisis either. It's also there to make sure that we're getting in early and trying to support people. So very broadly, what actually is an employee assistance program? So it is confidential support that you are providing as an employer, as a service for your employees and sometimes their families. So it depends on the program you have. Certainly at Strawberry Seed, we've extended out our program to include immediate family members of all of our team. Now, it is not necessarily there for that long-term support. Certainly one of the things I like about what Vincent's doing at Talked is that there is an opportunity for an employee, after they've used what they've been allocated by their employer, to continue on seeing that person if they want to. But the idea is it's an employer-funded program where employees who are having, whether it's a work or a personal issue, and could really benefit from talking to a counsellor to really help them through that issue, can actually sit down and have a conversation with someone. The most important part is it's independent and confidential. So as an employer, you're not getting a detailed report on what anyone is talking about. You don't, depending on the structure you have with the program you use. In my case, we sort of pay as we go. And so I know that it's been used 5 times in about approximately 5 years because I've received an invoice 5 times. I don't know what it was used for, who used it, all of those things. And that's the whole point, is it's not about the employer having any oversight over it. It's about the employer providing a service there for their employees to access. And as I sort of mentioned already, it's about early intervention. It is very helpful for crisis support. I'll talk about that a little bit, but early intervention is really key, because someone who's got ongoing mental health concerns may already have someone in place that's helping them. with those issues. But when someone, has something going on in their lives, something unexpected, whether it's, a loss in the family, whether it's, divorce or financial, there could be so many things that could go wrong for someone. Having a way to provide help and support to that employee at a time when they need it, and sometimes only 1 or 2 sessions might be enough for somebody to really be able to resolve their issue, may be the difference between how productive they're going to be at work or not. So, how do they actually work? Well, first of all, you can have lots of different options. So you can have online, you can have in person, you can have by the phone. As I said, when we first started, we used a local psychology clinic that offered that service, but I've got team members that in multiple states, and that wasn't really working for us. And it really is about finding the one that works best for you. But, I think these days, particularly post-COVID, a lot of services do have sort of multiple options available. So the idea is that you set up the service. Now, there's different models out there. It could be a pay per employee subscription model that, it's just sort of available across the year for your whole organization. Or as what I've done, having a smaller team, we sort of pay as we go. So when someone uses a service, we invoice for the service. So there's lots of different ways that can be set up, but you don't have to make a big upfront investment to provide an EAP program, because you can have one where you just sort of agree that if somebody accesses it, then they'll pay for it. You can also put limits on how many sessions per year an employee can access, or a member of their family can access. So for me, I've got 3 sessions a year that are already pre-approved that someone can just book in. Anything beyond that, they can request to have Strawberry Seed cover it, and I can approve that. But it's it's a really great option that these days. I mean, when I first started in HR 30 years ago, I worked for a large organisation, RACV, and they had 3 in-house counsellors that ran an EAP that was sort of on the ground, but we had sort of 1,000 employees, and that made sense. Whereas I think these days, we're working from home, and just smaller organisations, you don't have to be large to offer a service like this to your employees. And it's really, really important that you actually make sure that you promote it, because having an EAP is great, but if employees don't know that you've got one and it's available to use, it's not going to be something that they may take up. I think I do know of employers that I've spoken to personally who have put an EAP in place, but they go, oh, we don't want to tell anybody about it. We'll just tell them about it if they absolutely need it. And I said, well, that defeats the whole purpose of having people have the option to get in and have early intervention that can help them. So, you really, if you're going to invest in having it, make it normal to use, make it part of what people do every day. One of the statistics I found was that, utilisation rate is about 10 to 11% of employees in an organisation will actually take it up. And that's very much in line with what I've seen working in all size organisations. Like, often people don't necessarily use it, but even just knowing it's there as an option can be really helpful, particularly when certain issues or incidents happen. So according to the Employee Assistance Professionals Association of Australia and New Zealand, about 84% of EAP clients have reported that their issue has been effectively resolved. So it's shown to be very, very effective to have that early intervention and really help people through, humps in their life. And, there's so much flexibility out there that it makes it really easy for small businesses in particular to access. So where does it actually make a difference? Like, why should you be doing it? Well, I think, for a start, we'll start from an employee perspective. So for your team members themselves, there could be a number of reasons why someone might access it. So they might be quite stressed or burnt out. Maybe it's been a really busy period, or, there's been a bit of a crisis with something and everyone had to jump in and fix it. And, they're just feeling like they're a bit burnt out. It could be that you've got a conflict between a couple of employees, and part of the resolution is that you're actually going to encourage them to utilise the EAP to be able to help them work out strategies to improve how they can resolve conflict with others. But I guess the thing that I've probably seen the most is, say, personal or family challenges that can interfere with work. I think it's really naive to think that work and home life are not going to cross over. And for a lot of people, whether it's, marriages break down, people have death in their families, they have illness in their families, and being able to access something that gives, particularly when they've never maybe had support from a counsellor or a psychologist before, to know that they've got that opportunity to sort of just test the waters and try it out and see whether that's helpful. I can think of a really great example, a while ago in my career now, where we had a guy at work whose wife had just had their second baby. He was coming in and we could tell he was not sleeping, like he was not sleeping at all. And it did sound to me, and I am not an expert, but it sounded to me there could be a little bit of postnatal depression with his partner. And so he had a toddler, and then no one was sleeping in the house, and he was literally almost falling asleep at his desk. And I really encouraged him to sort of utilize it for his partner, who wasn't ready to use it yet. But I said to him, but it's there for you as well. You can be going and getting support to support her through what she's going through. And it took that pressure off him, and we said, go during work hours, utilize this service, so that he was getting the support he needs. So when from a work perspective, when he's at work, he's actually working and he's feeling more supported. And it's much less likely to end up in a more long-term issue. From a manager's perspective, managers themselves often can feel very overwhelmed by people issues when everybody's coming to them. And certainly I think that scares a lot of managers when, particularly we're talking around mental health, whether someone's disclosing that they've got a mental health condition, or whether they're just coming to them and wanting them to be their counsellor and help them through an issue. Being able to sort of say, hey, I really want to support you, but I'm not probably the right person to have this conversation, but we have an EAP program that you can go and find the person who you can talk to that can really support you and is an expert in this field, can take that pressure off. And that's what I mean about having it in your toolkit, having it in your back pocket. And sometimes managers themselves, and certainly I know that I find myself in the situation of supporting a lot of managers who are going through difficult conversations or decisions in their workplace with employees, whether it's restructuring, whether it's having to terminate somebody for poor conduct or whatever. These can be quite stressful. So having something that managers themselves can access, to be able to get some support themselves just on how they're feeling after that, can be incredibly helpful. And again, that's back to that more preventative and sort of getting in early, rather than waiting until it becomes a big issue and someone burns out. And as a business, for business as a whole, promoting a culture of care and well-being is something that can be a real point of difference. And a lot of people say those things, but what are they actually doing? So I think if you're a business who's saying, like, we really care about our employees, having a service like this that is available can be incredibly helpful. You do have an obligation to meet occupational workplace health and safety obligations, and psychological safety in a workplace. So it can be one of your strategies to do that, to show that you're not just saying the pretty words, but you're actually got something there that people can use. And another statistic I came across was more than 52%, so more than half of Australian small and medium business size owners and senior managers had said themselves that their mental health had been impacted over the last 12 months by economic pressures. So, even as a business owner yourself, having that ability to use it, or having your senior team be able to use it, can be incredibly helpful. And even though I've mentioned it is about early intervention, when there is a workplace incident or loss, having an EAP program that's already established that people know is there to access, quite often that's when we end up suggesting to an employer that they look at EAP. It was one of the first questions we ask. We had an employer earlier this year who had a former employee who was quite close to the team pass away. And, one of the first questions I ask is, do you already have an EAP? Because, to be able to say to the team, hey, this is here if you need it, if you need to have these, if you're going through a restructure or redundancies, or, a big upheaval, to be able to say to somebody, this is here if you need it. If there is an issue where, they're for example, you work in retail and someone's come in and tried to rob the place or whatever, there's, again, having EAP is fantastic. And, again, depending on the program and what you have, often they can even sometimes have people on site or have emergency sort of services that you can tap into. But I certainly have used that across my HR career to support in a lot of different ways. So what you really probably care about if you're a business owner is what's the business case for it, because this is going to cost me money is usually what's it's going to cost is usually the first thing that people say. And so look, depending on the service you use, depending on the number of employees you have and a whole ream of things, and where you're located, if you want someone local or you want someone an online like talked, look, you're probably looking at somewhere between the sort of high 100s to $300 per session, just depending on a number of factors. And that's when you're paying on a per session basis. So particularly for smaller businesses, not being locked into anything, whereas larger organisations might have sort of a more of a subscription service where they're paying a per employee amount to have that available and not necessarily have limits or things like that. Again, there's lots of different options out there. But certainly I think from a legal side, psychological safety is something that is becoming more and more prevalent in terms of obligations of an employer. So being able to show that you've got those strategies in place to help prevention and to actually use them to help prevent issues or prevent escalation of issues. There's a lot of information out there on the impact on stress and conflict and absenteeism. So certainly there can be huge cost savings and absenteeism. It's hard, there's lots of different sort of research out there, but some of the studies I looked at estimate between 25 to 40% decrease in absenteeism because people are able to get the support they need. And even just increasing engagement. So I looked at a study where an organisation that does employee engagement surveys, and they were saying, those that have EAP access can have up to 6% additional engagement over organisations that don't, which can be a big difference for people. So again, it's not just saying the pretty words that you care, it's showing it. So having it there can definitely improve trust as well, and retention. And ultimately, I think it's just part of the culture. If you say that you do support people and you want to support them, then having it there can be fantastic. And whilst there are some, there's helplines available, and certainly we're about to launch our mental health resources on our Seeds of Support library on our website, and there's definitely lots of lines and things, but there's a difference between knowing that you can go from an employee's perspective, that you can go and access up to say 3 sessions over the next couple of months with somebody who can just be there to support you, and that's part of your benefits for your job, versus I've got to go to the GP, I've got to go and get a mental health plan, I've got to pay for those sessions. Now I'm about to pass to Vincent again, let him talk about what they do. But one of the things I loved about what they do is that if someone is talking to a counsellor through their EAP and they really like them, is that they have the option to continue on working with that person, which is not always the case with some EAPs. So I certainly think there are my reasons why I think EAP is really important. And so what I'm going to do now is actually hand across to Vincent and let him share his screen and share a little bit about what they do.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm having a bit of tech issues. So actually, Carly, do you mind sharing the slides that I sent to you?
Oh, yep, I can find them. Give me 1 second. You can start
All
talking when I
good.
find them.
In the interim, I'll just give you a bit of background about myself and why I started Talked. So I'm formerly a lawyer. So everything that Carly mentioned about the importance of psychological safety from a legal perspective, I totally resonate with. But actually, one of the reasons why I built Talked was because I struggled accessing support during COVID. My first job was in a large law firm. I had 2 weeks in the office and then straight into working from home. And it was a real struggle personally accessing support. I tried out EAP. It wasn't great. It required us to call a number, at an unspecified time. There was no real callback on when they would get back to me, and it really left a sour taste in my mouth in terms of my own mental well-being. So as a result, me and my co-founder Ben, we built Talked, and Talked has since we aim to help connect patients with psychologists and counselors. Over the last 4 years, we've helped about 25,000 Australians connect with a psychologist of their choice within 24 hours. And we have also launched our Beyond EAP, because what we see is like EAP is not just the provision of the ability to connect with mental health connections. We actually see it as a proactive tool, not just purely a reactive tool, in order to support employee well-being from the start through from when they first create an account through to when they're seeing a psychologist, and even continuing support afterwards. So what I thought might be helpful is just to talk through some of the case studies that have come out with some of the clients that we have worked with and still are working with. So Carli, if you could change the slide. Yep. So here, this is one of our clients, Iveco. Iveco is a multinational business, but they have a presence here in Australia where they import and export trucks. It previously had an EAP, similar to what Carli saw. It was not being heavily utilized. And when I spoke with the HR and HSE managers, they suspected it was mainly because the industry that they worked in was heavily male dominated. There was a big stigma attached to accessing support. And as a result, they felt that this contributed to increased absenteeism and disengagement from work. And this, as Carli mentioned in some of her examples, the mental health of the employees doesn't necessarily stop when they walk through the door in the morning. It is if they're struggling at home, if they've just had a kid, or they're going through relationship issues, it's very hard to compartmentalize your mental health. And as a result, they actually saw a really a decrease in productivity. As a result, we worked together with Iveco to build a solution to really build in that culture. So as Carli mentioned before, it's like having an EAP that's a part of the organization's culture, where leaders and managers openly talk about the EAP and not just talk about, but have actually shared that they've used it. It really created that cultural safety that is talked about a lot in the psychosocial safety legislations. For example, for any of the people on the call here in Victoria, we have a new positive proactive duty coming to effect on the 1st of December, where employees now have a positive duty to mitigate against psychosocial risks. And there's many factors that you can go into this. So EAP is one of them, but it's also engaging with your employees ahead of time, understanding what the pain points are. And this is what we did with Iveco. So our solution was not just the ability to connect with the psychologist and counselor. We had tools and resources that were readily available and prompted to be provided to employees proactively, so that, for example, if we knew that there was a new parent in the organization, we would send them resources to be able to access new parenting tools and guides. That way we could be proactively engaged with them, so that when they're ready to take that step towards accessing therapy, we were already in there. So within the first 3 months of working with Iveco, we actually saw a rapid increase in terms of the utilization of the EAP. It was hovering about 1%, which is very low for an EAP, up to 10%. Obviously, we're still working to try and increase this, but we actually saw, when we spoke with Iveco, a decrease in how much it actually costs, because when they calculated these, there was a decrease in absenteeism. People weren't taking as much leave, and people weren't calling in sick as much, because I don't want to say it's causation, but there's a strong correlation between the implementation of the EAP and a decrease in cost at Iveco's end. And this is one of the stories that I'm quite proud of. Moving on to the next slide. This is another client of ours, Osmed, and Osmed had I would say a different issue that they were encountering when they were looking for an EAP. They had an EAP similarly, but the EAP was only available during the day. during business hours, no extended hours of operation, and it was only available via phone call. So they wanted to really expand and provide that holistic support. AusMed for here, their healthcare education. So that a lot of their employees are clinically trained. They're nurses, they are doctors. They have an understanding of what is the importance of mental health. But the EAP service didn't actually align with what they were looking to access. And as a result, they wanted to improve how they provided that support to their employees and take it to the next level. So as a result, we work closely with the team in order to find a solution that really integrated well with their workflows, because at the end of the day, every business has ways that they work. So whether it's through SharePoint or whether they have a Google Drive or whether they have weekly or daily catch-ups, we found a cadence which actually made sense with their team in order to integrate Talked into the organization. An EAP success or a wellbeing platform success is highly dependent on how engaged the people that are implementing it are. If, for example, like Carli mentioned, if you just want an EAP to sit in the background, you never talk about it, it's there in the docs because you think it's a tick boxing exercise for psychosocial safety, you're not going to get the benefits of it. And realistically, if an incident does occur and the regulators do come knocking, you need to be able to point to how you've been able to mitigate that and show it. If you've hidden the access to an EAP behind multiple files, regulators might not take time to that. Again, not legal advice. I've long stopped practicing as a lawyer, but that's what I've seen in the legislation and what the guidance has been put out. So what we saw with our wellbeing solution for AusMed was that when we encouraged people, when we took people through the tools that were available outside of just the therapy, for example, our journaling tool, we saw that there was really high uptake. And maybe this was because of the demographic of the employee base. A lot of the nurses were already journaling in their own time. But by implementing the journaling habit through the Talk platform, they actually were able to then opt to share those features with share those journal entries with their therapist, and then engage with therapy outside of working hours. So we actually saw that majority of the sessions, 65%, took place outside of work hours, which was a big surprise to me. I thought people would take it usually on their lunch break. No, most people actually access support outside of hours. Lastly, we have a lot of continued support. So as Carli mentioned, Strawberry Seed currently has 3 sessions through Talk's EAP and the ability to request more. But what I think the key feature that we have at Talked, and this is not meant to be a sales pitch, but it's the continuity of care, the importance for an employer to know that you have really supported your employee through that journey. And we have actually allow employees to continue accessing support even after the EAP is finished. Continuity of care is super important from a healthcare perspective. You don't want to be switching psychologists. You don't want to be seeing different people because your sessions with an EAP is finished. So through Talk, they can actually continue their mental health journey and continue to access support even after their sessions have finished. There's a couple of case studies I really wanted to share, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken to listen, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that may come out of today, and I'm sure Carli will share the slides and all that sort of stuff after.
Yeah, we'll do a Q&A at the end, and we're pretty much almost finished now, but I'm just going to share back my screen. Give me a moment. So yeah, and one of the things I particularly love about Talked is that it's not just that someone can continue with the same counsel. They can try different counsellors or psychologists and have a quick session with them that doesn't come off their time to see if they like them. They can search through and choose who they work with. But if they don't already have a mental health plan through the government, and they want to sort of continue on after their sessions that their business covers, there's actually GPs they can access through the platform to make that appointment to get the referral to help them continue on. So it's pretty seamless. And certainly we started using it because one of my team had used Talked as a platform just as an individual. And so when we started looking around, she suggested that we look at it for an EAP, and certainly it's had some great feedback, and we have the full access to the platform, and it's fantastic. There's so many good resources and things on there. I am not a journaler, but several of my team are, and so they've been taking that up as well. So my final thoughts for today, anyone who's watched these knows I like to have a couple of quotes at the end. Take care of your employees and they'll take care of business. It's as simple as that. I think that's a great sort of way to approach an EAP. It is just another way you can take care of people. And when people are financially invested, they want to return, but when they're emotionally invested, they want to contribute. I think having people know that you actually not just say you care, but actually have something there available to them can make a huge difference. Just before we jump to questions, it is Mental Health Month. This is our third webinar. We've got one more next week, which is on leading without burning yourself out. But I'll be hosting our last lunchtime one next week, and there's a lot of articles, including one that Vincent and one of our other clients, who's a psychologist that has EAP in her clinic, have contributed to, that we've put out, and we've got next week our new resources for online will also be available. And today's webinar and all of our webinars that we do are available to watch afterwards because they're recorded. That is our information, but if anyone has got any questions, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A, and we can answer anything that anyone would like. If there's anything specific that you would like answered around EAP, I'm sure Vincent would be happy to answer them, or I can answer them if someone prefers. This is where we see whether people are actually paying attention. Look, and it's one of those things, I think, you've got to sort of go out and have a look at what's available to you, and and I would also say talk to your employees. Like if you haven't got an EAP, let them know what options are out there. Have a look at what options are available. I highly recommend that, to reach out to Vincent. As I said, I'll share his details when I send out the recording. And, he's more than happy to go through the system and show you how it works, and show you the back end, and show you how you can utilize it. And but you can look at all different types of options and ask your team, like, what would you find helpful? But I certainly think these days having that online that's available outside of hours, because not everyone's going to want to do it in work hours. If anything, they may want to sort of do it on a weekend or something when it's not as obvious what they're doing. So doesn't look like we've had anyone pop any questions in. Essentially, thank you for attending today. Really appreciate everyone coming along. We will send out a recording, and I did ask the question when people registered if they were interested in you reaching out to them, Vincent. So those that have indicated yes, I'll pass their details on to you so that you can reach out to them post webinar. But thank you everybody for attending today, and I can't believe we actually hit it at half an hour. I never do them on time, so very proud of us. But thank you so much, Vincent, for coming along today and for contributing to the article that we put out as well, because I think what you've come up with is a really great service, and it's come from the fact that you didn't get the service you wanted. So often the best services come from that way, I think.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope everyone has taken something away from today. And I hope to hear from everyone soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.